started. We've got several members that need to go to other meetings, and so we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we get started, if we could bow our heads for a prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for another day. We thank you for the beautiful sunshine of today, and know that soon you'll be bringing the rain that we also need. We ask that you watch over each of us. Thank you for bringing us here safely. Return us home again safely. These things we ask in your name. Amen. All right. Since the senator is not here yet, let me find out what's going on here. The senator is tied up in another meeting, and she has asked me to present the bill. So, Representative Jaspers, I'm going to need you to take over for a minute. I gotta present the bill, and I can't chair at the same time. So, you can come sit right here.
We're just at a holding pattern.
No, I'm gonna present the bill.
Oh, you're gonna present the bill. Oh.
Too busy talking.
Do we have?
We do. It's only 4.
It's only 4. What's the bill? What's the bill number?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was not prepared to present the bill, but I will do what I can to, probably not as good as the senator would have done, but we'll go with it. I want to bring to you today Senate Bill 14. This is a bill that was authored by Senator Underman, and what this bill does is that it will create a Georgia Alzheimer's and related dementia task force, and it's going to require the task force to create a comprehensive state plan for Georgia to address the Alzheimer and related dementias and establish minimum requirements for such a plan. This bill establishes the Georgia Alzheimer and related dementia state plan task force to be composed of the following 6 officials: the Director of the Division of Aging Services, and that person will serve as chairperson, the Commissioner of Community Health or his or her designee, the State Health Officer or his or her designee, and the chairpersons of the House Committee on Health and Human Services, the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, and I think that the House Committee would be Human Relations and oh yeah, I see that now, Health and Human Services, and the House Committee on Human Relations and Aging. In addition, the task force is to invite other advisory members who have experience with Alzheimer's and other stakeholders to assist the committee. The purpose of the task force will be to create a comprehensive state plan for Georgia to address Alzheimer's and related dementias. At a minimum, this plan should include trends in the state's Alzheimer and related dementia population, including the state's role in long-term care and assistance in affected persons and their families, among other issues, existing services, resources, and capacity, the needed state policies or responses, including but not limited to strategies to address any identified gaps in service, ways in which state and local agencies and non-government entities can collaborate and work together to form a seamless network of education, support, and other needed services, and specific areas to be addressed, including but not limited to increasing public awareness of Alzheimer's disease, encouraging increased detection and diagnosis, improving the quality and capacity of the healthcare system and serving people with Alzheimer's disease, training for health care professionals and increasing the number of healthcare professionals to deal with this growing population, improving home and community care, improving access to long-term care, and promoting activities that maintain and improve brain health and public safety and legal concerns for this population. This bill gives the task force the power to hold public meetings and to request and receive data from the appropriate agencies and health care facilities to the greatest extent allowed by law. The task force may also accept public and private grants and enter into agreements necessary to the performance of its duties. The task force is to issue a state plan including proposed legislation, if any, to the Governor and General Assembly by March 31st, 2014. On this date, the task force will stand abolished. In its place, the bill establishes the Georgia Alzheimer and Related Dementias Advisory Council, which will be created upon the abolishment of the task force. The Advisory Council will include the same membership as the original task force and is to meet at least annually to review the progress of the state plan and make recommendations for change. As a person who currently has one parent who suffers from Alzheimer's, I think this legislation is a long time in coming, and it is something that Georgia needs to do, and I'll be glad to answer any questions if I can. I know that there are several people that are signed up to speak on the bill, and would like to give them the opportunity to do so.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to wait for questions if there are any from the committee, or go ahead and let the speaker
Why don't we
speak?
let the speaker speak, and then we can maybe answer all their questions later on.
Okay. First on our list is Dr. James Lon from Emory Alzheimer's Disease Research Center.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative. This is an important opportunity for us to comment on this important bill that the chairman so ably presented to this group. There are several points. I have too many slides to run through in the amount of time that I have, but there are several points that I want to make sure that I make in order to highlight the important elements of this bill and why it's so critical for our current and future needs in the state of Georgia. I don't think that anybody in this room needs a reminder on the magnitude of the problem that we're currently facing. Dementia of all causes, and Alzheimer's disease in particular, represents a massive worldwide epidemic. The numbers currently are about 35 million individuals suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and that number is going to increase dramatically in the coming years. There's a primary cause for this. The dementia epidemic, when you talk about dementia, it should be understood that dementia is a description of symptoms. One of the most common questions we get is, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? Dementia represents the gradual decline and loss of higher cognitive abilities that is driven by a number of diseases. And of the many brain diseases that can cause dementia, Alzheimer's disease is by far the most prevalent. And the reason for this is quite simple. This frequency has continued to increase, and the death by dementia or associated with dementia represents the second most common cause contributing to death currently. And why is that? The reason for that is that the individuals who suffer from dementia tend to be older, and as the population has aged, the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias has increased commensurately. If you look at this graph, the number of individuals between the ages of 65 and 75 who suffer from Alzheimer's disease is relatively low, about 3%. By the time we reach the age group over age 85, the rates of Alzheimer's disease can reach close to 50%. And if you look at the aging demographics of the world at large in developed countries and in the United States, the proportion of the population over the age 85 continues to increase. And by the middle of, by 2050, we estimate that there's going to be between 17 and 18 million individuals over the age of 85. And if you estimate that nearly half of those individuals will have Alzheimer's disease, it becomes an astounding and daunting number to deal with. Whereas other diseases have actually declined in terms of contributions to mortality. In one of the previous graphs that I skipped through, death due to cancer, COPD, and other illnesses has actually declined in recent years, whereas death due to Alzheimer's disease has continued to rise. And the rates of mortality vary from state to state, and unfortunately in the Southeast, the rates of death caused or associated with Alzheimer's disease has actually increased in recent years. And if you look at the areas in dark gray, that section of the Southeast represents an area where mortality rates relative to the rest of the country due to Alzheimer's disease is actually higher. Our interest at Emory and in the Alzheimer's Research Center represents the interest of a network of Alzheimer's centers established by the National Institutes of Health. We are one of 27 centers that are scattered around the country, with our primary mission being to advance our understanding and to improve the management and care of individuals suffering from Alzheimer's disease, and to eventually lessen the burden on society caused by this illness. We serve individuals throughout the state of Georgia and throughout the Southeast, and we're very proud of the work that we've been able to do with the support of many friends regionally. I'm going to skip through some of these, and I should emphasize if at any point any of the members of the committee have any questions for me, I'd be happy to pause and address them as we go. There have been a lot of advances that have occurred in the last 2 decades, particularly in understanding both the genetic and environmental causes contributing to Alzheimer's disease. Aging is certainly the most powerful risk factor, but there are a lot of things in terms of lifestyles, in terms of exposures, that we don't fully understand, but we know contributes to the prevalence and to the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease in any given individual. There's a lot of research that has generated a tremendous amount of optimism among researchers in the field, and hopefully is going to translate into optimism and hope for the many individuals suffering from disease and their family members. The individual items listed on this slide are not something I can cover in a short time, but what I really want you to focus on is the fact the advances in research that have occurred over the last 2.5, 3 decades has brought us to the brink of being able to deliver truly effective therapies that will slow down and perhaps prevent the development of Alzheimer's disease in individuals. A number of years ago, I remember being told by one of our social workers at a patient group, support group meeting, that one individual told another that, well, you know, Dr. Law says that before his career is done, we're going to have a cure for this disease. And one of the other patients looked at her and said, yeah, don't you wish he was older? And that was about 5 to 10 years ago. The plan currently is for us to try and make an impact on the devastating costs associated with this illness with truly effective therapies by 2025. I don't anticipate being retired until before 2040. And so I think what I said many years ago is coming true. And in order to do this effectively and reduce the major costs associated with this disease nationwide, we need to have a commitment on the part of many parties to develop a focused approach and a plan for how to address this in this country and in the state of Georgia. Nationally, this disease hasn't received the amount of attention that it needs. If you look at the funding for various illnesses provided through the National Institutes of Health, cancer and heart disease and HIV/AIDS, all of which are very important diseases, and on all of those fronts we've made major strides. If you look at the relative spending by NIH on Alzheimer's disease, you can see that it's a relatively small sum compared to many other diseases. All it's going to take is will time and resources in order to make true advances in dealing with this illness. And the nation is starting to move in that direction, and Georgia needs to as well. There is a national Alzheimer's plan that has been in development, and we certainly applaud the federal government in pursuing such aggressive methods, and also for setting the goal of preventing and effectively treating Alzheimer's disease by 2025. When I say a cure for Alzheimer's disease, I'm going to try and explain in a couple of minutes what I mean by that, because it may sound a little bit pie in the sky or Pollyannish to believe that we can truly cure this disease by 2025, but I think this is a reasonable goal. Let me just stop for a second on this slide. This represents current involvement of Alzheimer's disease and how it's impacting the population in Georgia. Currently, there are about 120,000 individuals in the state with Alzheimer's disease, and the graph shows the anticipated increase in Alzheimer's disease numbers in the coming years. And by 2025, left on its current trajectory, we anticipate a 45% increase in the number of Georgians suffering from Alzheimer's disease. That's if we don't make some serious headway against this illness. The costs to the state are enormous. The costs to individuals are even greater. But if you look at the amount of money spent from state funds to support long-term care facilities, it represents an enormous expenditure. In Georgia, we spend a higher proportion of those funds in skilled nursing home care than in other states. Many of those individuals who reside in those nursing facilities are suffering from cognitive decline. In fact, the majority of residents of skilled nursing facilities have one form of dementia or another. And nearly 75% of all individuals suffering from Alzheimer's disease wind up in a skilled nursing home by age 80. This map, when I look at this map, I have a little sense of guilt personally. What this represents are the states around the country that have currently adopted or in the process of developing a state Alzheimer's plan. There are 19 states that have already enacted such plans, and there, you see the other 13 that are in blue that have a plan in progress. Currently in the state of Georgia, this legislation, this bill that has been proposed, represents our first activity in this direction. I think that one of the things that I feel badly about is for the years that we have been working here, and I've been in Atlanta for nearly 20 years, I think that those of us who are in the biomedical research field have failed to reach out to some of our partners, including our partners in government leadership, to help come up with a cohesive plan to address this issue. And we intend to be much more active in this arena in the future, because we know that we can't make that progress on our own without the help of others around the state. This slide has way too many words on it, and I'm going to skip right through it. Somebody else made this slide, not I. It would have been trimmed down to about 10 words. But really the point of this slide is that if we're successful in improving our ability to diagnose individuals with Alzheimer's disease at an earlier stage in order to implement available treatments, we can already save a tremendous amount of money. The last line is the only one that I really want you to pay much attention to. If we implement some of the types of early diagnosis and treatment strategies that have been developed in other places, it could save the state close to $1.5 billion. The work involved in attacking Alzheimer's disease will come on many fronts, and it's important to also realize that this effort will have positive benefits, positive financial benefits to the state. There is currently about 12,000 public and private sector jobs supported directly or indirectly through biomedical research funds through NIH. It's estimated that $1 in national research funding generates $2.6 in economic activity. And federal research in academia currently in the state of Georgia accounts for about $1 billion worth of economic activity. If we can get our share of the additional resources that will be coming, we certainly can help increase our contribution in this area as well. The state plan is critical. It's a critical first step for us to develop a plan that will help to develop a comprehensive model with appropriate partnerships across all public and private sectors with great interest in this arena to find ways to prevent and better treat and manage our individuals with Alzheimer's disease. We want to be able to provide real hope for those who are suffering from the illness currently, help improve their management and care, and eventually prevent the burden from falling on others. This is the slide that I really wanted to spend a couple of minutes on. When I say a cure for Alzheimer's disease, we don't necessarily need a magic bullet that's going to make the disease go away. The disease, by its nature, tends to strike people in their later years. And so the goal is not to prevent the disease immediately altogether. We want to do that eventually. But if we can slow down the onset of disease or slow its progression, what it means is that people may suffer from mild symptoms or begin to develop some Alzheimer's symptoms. But the late stages of Alzheimer's disease that we all know too well, where individuals are devastated and their cognitive abilities are torn away and their quality of life is destroyed, those stages need never occur. If we can slow down the progression of disease and prevent or delay the onset of disease by 5 years, that will have an enormous impact on the number of individuals who actually suffer Alzheimer's disease in its devastating stages. We can reduce the prevalence and cost by close to 50% just by delaying onset by 5 years. So the goal here is to prevent the onset of symptoms for as long as possible, and once they start, to try and slow that down. If we can do that, people will die of some cause at age 90, 95, but hopefully with their cognitive abilities still sufficiently intact to be able to interact with their families and loved ones. And along the way, we need to have a plan for how we're going to help the individuals who are currently suffering from disease as we move from here to there. And that's what the Georgia State Plan needs to be about. We need to have a long-term view of how to manage this, slow its devastating impact, and help care for those individuals who are currently suffering. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this committee.
I think we've got a question here.
Thank you, Dr. Law. Maybe not so much a question as a comment. First of all, let me commend you on your work. Like Chairman Benton, my father passed away and had dementia. I understand the devastation of this disease. And I think you addressed a couple of different things. I was amazed when I was sitting there looking at the numbers that were dedicated to other diseases. And believe me, I have no problem with giving money for cancer research or heart research or anything like that. But wouldn't it be a fair statement to say that if we continue to pour money into finding cures for these diseases and do nothing to address the Alzheimer thing, then basically what we've done is we've given people an extension of life, but we haven't done anything about their quality of life?
I think that is a wonderful point, sir. You are absolutely right. And in fact, the plots that show the causes of death decreasing from a number of those illnesses, while the causes of death associated with Alzheimer's disease, the number of deaths associated with Alzheimer's disease continues to climb, translates into individuals suffering in the latter stages of their lives with devastating mental decline. You're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%.
Thank you. And I think even if you were to take out I don't hate to use the word emotional because I most certainly cannot divorce myself from the emotional aspect of it, but if you were to take out the emotional aspect of it and to look just at the numbers, the economic impact and the cost on society as a whole would be well worth the cost.
In fact, if we don't address this issue in a more effective way, it will inevitably bankrupt the system.
I appreciate your commitment to it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
16.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, I was sitting here talking with my colleague. It seems like this particular disease has progressed in the number of people that we see living, surviving, or dying from it. Do you have any idea what the causes of Alzheimer's are? Are there genetic markers or anything like that?
We do, and that's where this is so exciting, and that's where I have such great optimism that we're going to make advances. There are many genetic causes. Usually, when we consider genetics, we think about diseases that are inherited in a very predictable way, just as I would expect my child to have dark hair, for instance. You think maybe genetics play the same kind of role in passing on Alzheimer's or other diseases. It's much more complex than that. There are a handful of genes that we know play a very important role in the disease, and many others that we're currently discovering as we speak. And those factors are going to come into play as we kind of look at the future of where this is going. At a point in the not-too-distant future, people will reach the age of 50 as I did last year, and just as I was supposed to, haven't yet, but supposed to schedule a colonoscopy for screening purposes, people will undergo screening, whether that be genetics or imaging or blood or spinal fluid testing, that will screen for my risk of developing Alzheimer's disease when I'm in my 70s and 80s. And so those risk factors are being better understood now. There's much to do yet. And that's why I say we need the will and resources to do it, but we can do this.
Yes, good afternoon and thank you, and sorry for being late. My name is State Representative Sandra Scott, and I would just like to commend you all on the work that you're doing with Alzheimer's, because I do know a lot of seniors that have Alzheimer's, and we always wonder how did it come about and why. So I would just like to commend you on the work that you are doing, and I will hope that this committee will be in agreement with what you all are doing. And I would just like to say thank you for the work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions for the doctor? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sheila Hammerstone.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Sheila Humberstone. I'm with Troutman Sanders Strategies, and I'm here today on behalf of the Alzheimer's Association Georgia chapter. But I also want to talk a little bit about Emory as well. As a little bit of background, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at the age of 58, so it's not just your grandparents' disease. She passed away last January at the age of 65. So it's truly not your grandparents' disease. It can be your children's disease or your own disease. That being said, before you feel too sorry for me, I have a dear friend who's 46 years old and is living with Alzheimer's. So it really is becoming a younger person's disease. And I want to commend the work both from Emory and the Alzheimer's Association, because it's rare that you find in charitable organizations and research organizations a true collaborative effort to finding a cure and to supporting family members. And as you can see today, by having two of those entities here, it really is what's good for one is good for all. And I really want to personally thank both of them for coming forward and supporting this bill. The Alzheimer's Association represents the over 200,000 Georgians with Alzheimer's, as well as the almost 500,000 caregivers who are taking care every day of these individuals. And I'm sure we've already heard about some folks that have dear friends and family members with the disease. And I'm sorry to say, if you don't, you more than likely you will before too long. And so we do think that this plan is a critical step to make sure that we have all the services needed for our aging baby boomers, and to know what research we need, what services we need, and what products we need out there in Georgia to be sure that we're able to care for all of our folks with Alzheimer's. And so I encourage your support of the bill, and we'll take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for the lady? Thank you very much. Catherine Fowler.
Good afternoon. I'm so grateful that your committee is considering this legislation. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Council on Aging, and I'm here also to represent the Coalition of Advocates for Georgia's Elderly. So there are not just two organizations behind this, Emory and Alzheimer's Association, but there are 500 members of COAGE representing service providers, area agencies on aging, seniors, and family members all over this state who come together every July to choose their priorities about what legislation or what funding they would like to see passed by you during your session each year. And they chose the Alzheimer's State Plan as their #1 priority this year. I imagine that if I turned around and asked people in this room to raise their hands if they have someone close to them who has been affected by dementia, in this group it would probably be 9 out of 10. We all have our stories to tell, as does the chairman. I cared for my dad for 14 years, and he passed away of vascular dementia. He was kept alive through many, many heart attacks, only to live the last years of his life living with dementia, as did his family. And it is not just an aging issue. We're very grateful that the Division of Aging Services is specified as being a lead entity here to bring this forward. But I know that Dr. Bulad, who's the director of DAS, frequently says this is not just an aging issue, because there are young people with various forms of dementia, and there are family members, there are workplaces that are affected by it as well. So it is truly affecting our entire society. And we would urge you to lend your support to the state plan, and if passed, to let you know that there will be many, many partners around the state who will be trying to implement it and move it forward. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Fowler? Thank you, ma'am. Do any of the committee members have a question for me since I presented the bill? That's good. You're not making any points over there, Representative Rogers.
No, I have no questions for you, Mr. Chairman, except for the fact that at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a do-pass motion.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll recognize you for that motion now.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, let me commend everyone here for the work that you're doing. I appreciate it greatly. And with that being in mind, I'd like to make a do-pass motion that we accept this bill and send it to the entire House.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any comments, questions? In that case, we'll have a vote on the measure. Senate Bill 14. All those in favor of do pass, if you would, raise your hand. All those opposed?
1, 2, 3.
The measure passes, and we'll move on to the Rules Committee. The chairman thanks the committee for coming today, and all the people in the audience for being here today as well. Thank you.